Welcome again to Structure and Bonding Topic 2. Now in Lesson 7 we're going to look at an area of chemistry which actually comes from a slightly different part of the specification. This is from AQA's energy change topic, but we've included it here among structure and bonding because it's quite a short topic. And we are going to be looking at how reactions involving ions can be used to produce electricity, in particular batteries and fuel cells. Right, now here is a quick starter quiz. Don't copy this, don't write it down. Just pause the video and think about what your answers might be. Pause it now. Here we go with the answers to the memory check of previous lessons. You can pause this and take yourself through the answers. The reason for doing this is to revise the transition metal ions and also the group 1 ions, including these half equations. Remember that these half equations show a loss of electrons. A loss of electrons is shown by the electrons being produced as a product on the right-hand side. Okay, right, now today's driving question is, how does a battery work? So we're going to be looking at cells. A battery is more than one cell in series with each other. And you'll have come across the word electrolyte and gain of loss of electrons in the electrolysis topic. And there are some similarities in today's lesson. And so we're going to be looking at gain and loss of electrons. Now, electrons tend to flow out of the negative end of a battery. And then they make their way around the circuit. And then the current flows back to the positive side of the battery. And the job of the battery is to provide the voltage, which helps create the energy transfer in the circuit. Okay, so batteries produce a flow of electrons. Now, there needs to be a chemical reaction happening inside there in order to produce those electrons, and that reaction involves ions. And oh yeah, right, before we go any further, here's a quick historical story. I quite like this story. Right, now this guy, Luigi Galvani, was an Italian scientist, and he was dissecting frogs, or one of his students were dissecting frogs, when they noticed that if you touched two different metals to the frog's leg, it twitched. Now, this guy, Alessandro Volta, worked in the same university in Italy, and he was a bit annoyed with Galvani because Galvani decided this was some sort of magical properties of frogs. And Volta set out to prove him wrong. And he showed that the same effect could be produced with a lemon, two different metals, can produce electricity. And he also then showed that it didn't need to be a living thing. You can use salt water, so cardboard soaked in salt water, but different plates of metals, he used copper and zinc, and that will produce electricity. And that's how the first battery was produced. He called it a voltaic pile, right? And we can use fruit to make batteries using the same effect. Okay, two different metals. And the reason why it works is that the juice inside the fruit forms an electrolyte, a bit like the salt water in the voltaic pile. An electrolyte is a liquid made of dissolved ions, so water with ions dissolved inside it. You'll have come across that idea in electrolysis, right? So two different metals in an electrolyte will produce a potential difference of voltage. Now, in some ways, this is the opposite of electrolysis. In electrolysis, electricity is supplied from a power pack in order to split a chemical, a compound, into electrodes, into elements, I should say, right? So in electrolysis, use a power pack to supply electricity to split a compound into elements. This is the other way around. The reaction inside the electrolyte supplies electricity to the circuit. So it's kind of the opposite of electrolysis. Now the two metals need to be different. If you use the same metals, you get zero voltage, zero potential difference, right? But the two metals need to be placed directly into contact with the electrolyte. And this forms what we call a cell. And as I mentioned before, an electrolyte is a dissolved salt, dissolved ions, ions dissolved in water. Now, what do we mean by a cell? Pause the video and decide if you think it's A, B, C, or D. Here we go with the answer. The correct answer was D, a device that produces electricity made of two different metals in contact with an electrolyte. Now, in school, we would start doing some investigations and we would try it out. We'd get some fruit juice and put two different metals in and some voltmeters to measure the voltage. For example, copper and magnesium in an electrolyte produce a voltage of 1.56 volts. And we could try different combinations of metals like copper and zinc, and we could record those results in a table. Click, click, click. Let's see the completed results table. Here it is. Okay. Now, I've put them in order of voltage, right? And we're looking for a pattern. And to find a pattern, we're going to compare it to the reactivity series of metals. So let's revise the reactivity series, a list of metals from least reactive at the bottom up to most reactive at the top. Now, if we compare these results, they follow the order of the reactivity series. So you might start to conclude, oh, the more reactive it is, the higher the voltage, but that's not correct. Right, the actual correct pattern is it's the difference in reactivity that causes the voltage. The greater the difference in reactivity, the greater the voltage of the cell. Right, now, what I should have pointed out is that in every single one of those cells, copper was the left-hand electrode. Right, so let's rewind a minute and just have a look at these experiments. They were all compared against copper, iron against copper, zinc against copper, magnesium against copper. So copper is staying the same every time. Now, if you put copper and copper with itself, you get 0. So lead is 0.47 volts when it's connected to copper. Iron, 0.79 volts when it's connected to copper. Zinc, 1.10 when it's connected to copper, right? Now, when you're going to need to think about what happens if you don't compare it to copper, what if you compare it to something else? Right, let's go forward again. The difference in reactivity causes the voltage, right? So for example, magnesium and lead are very different in reactivity, so they would produce a high voltage if they were used together in a cell. Now, one way to remember this is the difference in reactivity causes potential difference, right, which is the correct name for voltage. Okay, so difference in reactivity causes potential difference. The larger the difference in reactivity, the larger the potential difference of the cell measured in volts. Right, now, what if we were going to compare it to other metals? So we can see that when lead is compared to copper, the voltage is 0.47. Right, now if you put silver in, you get minus 0.46. Right, now there's a reason for that, and it's to do with the gain and loss of electrons. What it means is that the current starts flowing the other way in the cell, but we can still record it as minus 0.46 volts. Okay, so the results of this experiment gave us a consistent scale for all of their potential differences measured compared to copper. But what if we start comparing different pairs of metals? Well, if we connected up iron and zinc and measured it using a voltmeter, we would find a voltage of 0.31 volts. Now, if you look carefully at these results, 0.31 volts is also the difference between zinc and iron's voltages with copper. In other words, we can start using these results to predict the voltages for any pair of metal, right? The potential difference between zinc and iron will be the same as their difference in their voltages compared to copper. Right, so 1.10 minus 0.79 equals 0.31 volts. We can predict that before we even do the experiment by using the results against copper. So let's have a think about this one. What if it was zinc measured against lead? Pause the video for a moment and work out what do you predict the voltage to be if it was zinc and lead. Here we go with the answer. It should be 1.10 minus 0.47, which gives 0.63 volts. So if we then measure that with a voltmeter, we should find that it matches 0.63 volts. Let's have a go at another example. What if it was zinc and silver? Pause the video and decide what you think the voltage would be between zinc and silver. Okay, here we go. Now, it's the difference between them, but we need to take into account the negative value of silver. So one way of doing that, click, 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 is 1.10 minus 0.46, and that gives a value of 1.56 volts, and we can confirm that with experiment. Okay, so we always do the highest voltage minus the lowest voltage. But because silver is negative, that means we're doing the highest voltage minus a negative number. So the potential difference of zinc and silver will be 1.56. Now, have a think about this. Pause the video, try and come up with an answer. Why would zinc and silver make the best combination of metals out of all of these ones that are here? Why would zinc and silver be the best combination of metals to use in a battery? Pause it and come up with a sentence for your answer. Okay, here we go. What did I say? Zinc and silver have the largest difference in reactivity. So a cell made using zinc and silver will have the largest potential difference. We could predict that numerically by seeing that there's the largest difference in their numbers as well. So they have the largest difference in reactivity. That will give the largest potential difference, and that would make it effective as a battery. Okay, it is time for the writing task of this lesson. We've got some keywords to describe. We're going to do a little diagram and explain how a cell works, and then start using some of these results. So here are some sentence starters. Here is a diagram. Now, as well as labeling the diagram, you need to explain it, explain how it works, right? So I'm looking for an explanation as well as a diagram. And then using our understanding to explain the situation in more detail, getting into the pattern of reactivity and how that tells us the potential difference, and then actually working it out numerically. So pause the video, work your way through this task, go for it, your turn. I'm going to move this on to the answers so that you can check your work. Please remember to add in any extra detail that you didn't think of. A cell is a device that produces electricity. A battery is more than one cell linked together. An electrolyte is a solution of dissolved salts or dissolved ions that helps electricity to flow. How does a cell work? Well, I've labelled metal A, metal B. We could call them electrodes. And then we've got the electrolyte here, and I could have labelled the voltmeter, but I've got the symbol for it there. Two different metals need to be placed into an electrolyte in order to produce electricity. That's called a cell. Right? If we link cells in series, we call it a battery. So we're looking for the labeled diagram. You could use the word electrode and voltmeter as well, and the fact that the metals need to be different and they need to be in contact with the electrolytes. Right. Changing the metals in the cell changes the voltage because different metals have different reactivity. So a big difference in reactivity would produce a large voltage. A small difference in reactivity would produce a small voltage. So it's the difference in reactivity that causes the potential difference in volts of the cell. Zinc and silver would be the best for a battery because they have the largest difference in reactivity, therefore the largest potential difference. Right, here are the answers to the numerical questions. Now, with chromium, for the extension, it doesn't tell you the exact voltage, but you should be able to tell from its reactivity that the answer will be somewhere between zinc and iron. So its reactivity is in between zinc and iron, therefore its voltage with copper will be somewhere in between the numbers for zinc and iron. So any number that you picked between 0.79 and 1.10 will be acceptable for question 5. Here we go. Today I achieved describe because I can describe the meaning of the keywords like electrolyte and cell and battery. Today I achieved explain because I can explain how a cell or battery works. Today I achieved use because I can explain how reactivity of metals affects the voltage. And today I achieved combine because I can predict cell voltage and calculate it with different combinations of metals and electrolytes. Okay, well done for your work today. Remember to go back to show my homework and complete the 10-question quiz. And next time we will be looking at evaluating different types of battery. Thank you very much. Have a good day.